In a couple of minutes, I'm going to interview the Kemps and the Leadbetters, which should be really fun, and I'm very excited about that. I said the word fun. It's actually going to be confrontational, and I was going to ask some really tough questions. But today we're just celebrating. We're celebrating God's faithfulness, and we're also celebrating faithful obedience in terms of stepping into the things that the Lord has for us. Now, for the last couple of weeks, we've been in the story of Elisha, which is imprinted on your brains, I know. And it's one of the By Faith series, Elisha, A Life of Obedience and Authority. And so I just kind of wanted to frame the interview at the beginning. You know, when you're like, actually, I feel that this might even be part 3. It wasn't intended to be part 3, and none of the other sites are getting part 3, but you are getting part 3 of Elisha, the Anointed One. Well, yeah, we could go with that. You're getting the trilogy, and I woke up this morning, actually. I wasn't planning to do this, but I felt like the Lord just spoke through one of the passages in Elisha's life. One of the great things about preaching is that you get to spend time with a character, and you actually have to delve into those scriptures. And I just felt, there's something that the Lord wants to bring out. And so if I was to give today a phrase, it would be this: just look up. Just look up. And there's just this encounter, which is one of the last encounters that Elisha has in the Bible. And so I'm just going to really quickly, before we jump into the interview, just talk this through. So the king of Aram's gone to war against Israel. And every time the king of Aram tries to make a strategic move against the people, Israel knows what's going to happen. They anticipate it. And they don't have undercover spies in Aram's camp. They have something greater. They have Elisha the prophet, who is hearing the word of the Lord. And so he's just knowing what's going to go on. And so every time they try and attack, Elisha's like, they're going to be there. They're going to be there. Avoid them there. So Elisha's kind of orchestrating what's going on. And in 2 Kings 6, verse 10, so that's the passage, 2 Kings 6. When the king of Aram learns that it's Elisha who's involved, he becomes enraged. And so he's like, I know who it is. It's Elisha. And so he sends soldiers to go and surround him. Basically, the strategic plan was wipe out Elisha. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and actually that makes sense. It's like Elisha knows what's going on. So they surround Elisha. So we just pick it up, 2 Kings 6, verse 13. It says, go, find out where he is, the king ordered, so I can send men and capture him. The report came back, he's in Dothan. Then he sent horses and chariots, and there's a strong force there. And they went by night and surrounded the city. When the servant of the man of God got up and went out early the next morning, an army with horses and chariots had surrounded the city. Oh, no, my lord, what shall we do? The servant asked. Of course, absolutely terrified. Don't be afraid, the prophet answered. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And Elisha prayed, open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see. Then the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he looked and saw the hills full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. I love that story. And it's really just that picture that we, as human beings, so often have no idea what's going on in the heavenly realms. And the tendency is to look at every situation through the natural without God's perspectives. And so when I'm saying, just look up, that's really the encouragement of what I'm talking about. In this moment, you've got the servant who's absolutely terrified. He doesn't know what to do. He's like, Elisha, what are we going to do? And Elisha's like, you just haven't seen what's going on. Just look up and you will see the hills and the mountains are full of the heavenly host. And that's kind of a picture, I think, for us as a community. When we see with the natural, when we see with the human eyes, it's like, oh, Lord, what's going to happen? Oh, Lord, I'm overwhelmed. I'm a bit terrified. And then Elisha's like, just look up. And it reminds me of a song that I think we haven't sung for a couple of years. And it may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. This is how I'm going to fight my battles. And that song has been it's been going round on a loop because it's not a very wordy song. Basically, that's it. That seems to be the song. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. And then it kind of loops and it goes around and around. And like 10 minutes later, you're like, I'm still singing. But there's something powerful. It's like when I feel like I don't know what the Lord's doing, I am still surrounded by you. I'm surrounded by your goodness. I'm surrounded by your faithfulness. And so I just wanted to put that into the room. I just felt that was the shortest part 3 you've ever had in your life. But there's something in that story, just an encouragement. Just look up and see what the Lord is doing. So I'm going to invite the 4, as they were called. I had a real chuckle earlier in terms of the seating, and I just want to show you something. I thought that we could have done the interview. I sat on this, and then I've actually got 4 of these very, very little chairs. And that just really amused me. And we decided, oh, wow, the shutter's coming down. Surprise. It's going to go up in a minute. I don't know what's going to happen. But thank you, Al. Safety mechanism. Do you know what? That's really rude, Al. I'm actually quite offended. But... So anyway, this is time for... So, oh, look at them. What a lovely little slide. They look much younger in those pictures. So we've been talking throughout this whole series of Elisha, really about the journey of obedience and Elisha's obedience to the Lord. Look at all of these different things, the call of Elisha. And... part of this journey is some of us have been more involved than others. I've been quite involved in the 6-month journey, but for the rest of you, it's like, what has, Rach and Dave, the journey of obedience looked like for you over the last season?
Well, to go back even further than the 6 months, when James first asked us about this, I was quite a curveball. About leading the North, yeah. And he effectively said, like, you can say no, which was nice. Or he was like, you could say yes sort of in an interim, couple of years, or you can say yes indefinitely. And he asked that and then hung up the phone, and we were just like, what? And went on about a month's journey of like, what is the Lord saying? What is he calling us to? There are times when we were like, like so excited for it, and times when it felt like, oh my goodness, how would we ever do that? And really trying to discern his voice and be like, what are you calling us to? And eventually after the month, we felt like he said yes to the 2 years, but with an open end to be like, will we extend it after that 2 years? And that's what we told James. And then, like loads of you will know, the last year particularly has been really quite hard for us. But in that time, we've never felt God say anything like to change. We didn't feel like he was saying, like lay the site down or anything like that. And so we kind of were just like, oh Lord, this is tough, but we know you said it. We could kind of go back to that story of calling. We're like, okay, well, unless you say otherwise, there's a really helpful phrase, which is old orders are good orders till there's new orders. And we were just like, all right, let's keep going with it. And then probably about 4 or 5 months ago, we started getting to the point where we're like, it's coming to the end of the 2 years. Is God saying to extend? Is he saying to stop? And we started talking about adding another term in. And we really didn't know what the Lord was saying. And then Judah was in hospital 3 months ago, sometime. And I was at home and you were in hospital with him. And I had really good prayer time where I felt like the Lord say, lay it down at Christmas at the end of the 2 years. And then... go back to trusting me for what's next for you. And I was like, okay. Didn't get to see Rach. Judah came home, and Rach straight away went off to Norfolk to see, because you were visiting your gran, weren't you? And it's your story now.
Thanks. So I was in Norfolk visiting my gran, and snuck away to have some prayer time. And was just like, Jesus, I don't really... what are you saying? What are you doing? It feels like something's changed. It feels like I can't work out what you're saying. I don't feel very peaceful. What are you doing? And it just felt like he was like, if you just look back through your journal, you'll know the answer to that. And I was like, okay. And I read back through and I was like, you have never changed this is a thing I'm calling you to do for 2 years. And you're coming to the end of the 2 years. And just was like, okay, I think that's what you're saying. Felt very peaceful about it, but went home and was like, I have no idea if Dave's going to agree with this, or whether he's going to be like, no, it's just getting good. It's been good for a while. And I was like, I think we need to talk about like north and stuff, and he was like, oh yeah, I had prayer time and I felt like God said we need to stop at Christmas. I was like, oh, this is a really easy conversation then. Call me too. So yeah, just that was like, I guess our story of just following what the Lord was saying. But I think a real challenge for us was, there's been loads of times where we have been like, the Lord is calling us into this, the Lord is calling us into this, and we'll do that, we'll take the next step, whatever that means, like whether that is like whether we can see logistically how that works or not. I think, at least for me, this is the first time I've ever had to listen to the Lord say stop. Like, it's always been go, go, go. And I was like, I don't know how to do an obedient stop. I've never done an obedient stop before. What do you do when you stop? So that was definitely, it's like a whole new learning curve of listening to the Lord. But like, okay, Jesus, you're saying stop. Cool. We'll listen. We'll follow. So yeah.
Yeah, and the interesting thing with the stop, isn't it? Sometimes we have to stop something for the Lord to then put into our lap something else, isn't it? And without the no. My wife and me are very different. I would like to say yes to every opportunity in life, and generally try to. And she would say, you have to say 95 good no's for 5 good yeses. She's quite wise, isn't she? I want to say 95 good yeses for 5 no's, but, just the difference. But, yeah, I think that's... In terms of just reflection on the site, what have you seen growing in the site during the last... as you look back over the last couple of years, what have you felt the Lord's deposited or grown?
I realised I missed a whole bunch of what I wanted to say because I thought that was the next question. So I'm going to backtrack on some of the things I was going to say, and then I'll answer your question, which was that our, I guess, experience of like that step of obedience has, like, on this preaching series where you've been talking about like taking the little that you have and like giving that to the Lord and letting him multiply it. And you were preaching last week, I think, on this, and we're talking about like the feeding of the 5,000 and bringing the like 5 loaves and 2 fishes and Jesus multiplying that like exponentially. And I think like that has been our experience of being here, is that we, like, when James asked us to lead the site, like, we have been in church and on staff for a long time, but always like as youth pastors, kids pastors, and I was like, I don't know that I have anything to bring. Like, I have a little bit of like, I love the church, I love the Lord, like, and I know how to lead under 18s, and this is a new one. And just the, like, when you were speaking last week, I was like, Jesus, you have like taken our little and like multiplied it exponentially, like in us and also in the site of like.
Well, when we took it on, you said we didn't even know how a service ran because we were always out in kids and youth, and James was like, well, you just run a service, and we were like, how?
With games? Shall we play some games?
Yeah.
Well, is there
Ninja, Bible study.
And yeah, just like growing. I mean, I can remember like standing up and holding a microphone. I was like, I just shout in youth. I don't know about microphones. So yeah, just he has like exponentially multiplied the little that we had in like arriving, and has grown it in us and in the site. Do you want to add anything on that?
No, that was very good.
Great.
Now you can answer a second.
Oh, the next question was, what have we seen growing in the site? That was kind of what we've seen in us. I mean, it has physically grown. Like, when we arrived, the site was still coming out of COVID, and the first thing we did was church in the forest, because we didn't have a venue, and there were about 15 of us. And there weren't only 15 people in the site, but like the sort of like regathering, and then like many of you have joined the site in the last 2 years. So like it has physically grown. And I think we've like grown an identity as well as a site of being like fun and family, and like that's our reputation, I think. Like, when people talk about preaching the mall, they're like, you guys are the like rowdy site. Which I'm like, I love that. That's the site I want to be.
That is really true.
Yeah.
Someone said we were the rowdy site, and I was like,
Yes. That's what you get when you give youth pastors a site to lead. And but also it feels like family to us. Like, when we arrived, we'd been out in youth for, Dave had been in kids for the last like 8 years. And so this is the first place we ever have been in church as grown-ups. and been like, oh, we have our own church family, and it feels like family and it feels like community, which is like when we say we love the site, we're not joking. Like, this is our church family too. Yeah. And it feels like community as well. It's like not just for us, it feels welcoming.
Yeah. Yes, I think seeing that grow, like the community side of things grow, and like people coming in and being welcomed in. And I think for me, one of the things that's been really powerful is seeing people, like, we are really fun, we're rowdy, and that's awesome. I like that. But seeing people journey really hard things together as well. Like, we've been through some pretty hard things as a site, especially the last few months. But seeing people journey that together with the Lord in their small groups, with people who love them, has just been it's been so powerful. And people seeing that, people like taking their own step of obedience. So we mentioned Sarah Kelly earlier. And again, I was chatting to her in the week, and she stepped up into this role. And she just said to Damien, she was like, I don't know how to do this. And he was like, well, I think you can do this really well. And she was like, all right then. I see why it's valuable. I'll give it a go. And one of the visions for multi-site is that there is space for people to do that. Like, there's space to people to step into roles that wouldn't have been there otherwise. And she's done an amazing job, and her team, like, supporting her. So just seeing just little things like that. Well, no, that's not a little thing. Big things like that sort of flourish and grow has been fantastic. And then the other thing I would say I've seen grow, and this has been like more of a slow burn, but prayer. I think prayer in our site. And I don't say that because it's the Jesus Sunday school answer. Like, I find prayer quite hard. I have to really remind myself that prayer is meant to be my go-to about situations. But like, almost like the force and the weight of prayer growing in this site over the last couple of years has been amazing. And like the Wednesday prayer meeting, which was the Tuesday prayer meeting, I've never consistently gone to a prayer meeting, especially an early morning one, in my whole life. And like, I literally love it. It is so good. And that, there are times when we're just going to bosh out these prayers because it's discipline and that's what we want to do. But there have also been times where it's like the Lord has just taken it and like the Spirit's fallen and like it's just been amazing. So yeah, I've really seen prayer growing throughout the site over the last couple of years.
Just one last question before I jump to the leads. They've been very quiet. No, they haven't been very quiet. A couple of highlights.
Couple of highlights. It's always a worry with a highlight that you'll forget something. So it is worth caveating. Like, there have been just endless amazing moments. Probably one of my favourite was when we were in the hotel before we got this venue. We did an evening of prayer and worship. And I don't know what happened. I don't know who got what word out. But we were exactly 50% of us were Vineyard, and 50% were just people from other churches. And I'd say there were a good, maybe 15 people, 15 Vineyarders and 15 other people, a couple of whom I'd met before. I had no idea where they came from. They all just seemed to happen upon this one evening. And it was really lovely to all gather together. And then at the end, I was just like, I just really feel like the Lord is calling us to bless the body. And so I was like the body of the church. And I was like, if you're not from a Vineyard, stand up. And they all stood up. And we were literally 50-50. It was 15-15. And I was like, if you are from a Vineyard, go and find one of them and just pray for them and bless them. And it was one of the most powerful ministry times I've ever seen. And that always will stick with me as like, yeah, that was really something.
I think like a site highlight, I'm going to do a site highlight and a personal highlight. A site highlight was getting this venue. It's such a great venue, and it's amazing for our kids and our youth especially. Like we draw youth to here because of the football pitch, which is amazing. They want to come to church because it's fun. So yeah, this venue and in a local community, like the Holiday Inn was great, but it didn't have a community because it was on a roundabout, on Corriton roundabout, and being in a place which is in a community is, I think, been such a highlight to like journey through with the site over the last like year or so. And I think my personal highlights, plural, as of this weekend, have been the ladies' Christmas events. They're so fun. Like last year we did ladies' calligraphy, this year we did ladies' wreath making, and it just felt like family, felt like community, and just lovely to do something fun together. And just a joy. It's my church family.
Pass over to you, Leds. A couple of highlights.
I think a highlight for me is our son went from primary to secondary this year, and with all that transition and they're like, what's going to happen? I had no fear about him transitioning to youth, and it's been a joy to see him go and step into that, and then youth on a Tuesday, stuff like that. And I look at him now and that I'm like, I have no worry about that. I'm so excited for him to do his youth at church. My family, when we were younger, had to move because there wasn't a lot of kids stuff going on, and they moved for us. I'm like, I'm never going to have that issue. Yes, that's us.
Yeah, amazing. I think small groups is the one for me, really. Like when we came to the North site, it was like, what are we going to do here? Like, we kind of felt like it was a new shift for us, and it was like small groups was one of those things that was like, let's lead a small group. And that was great. And then it was like, but we live near the gate. And we're trying to come north, and we want to do a north thing. And so I had a chat with Dave, and we're like, mate, we're all up for it. We can lead a group, but you're going to have to find us somewhere to lead that isn't our house, because otherwise it's not going to be north. And we want it to be all in north. And so at the same time, the wonderful Newberries, are they here? They're not here. They were kind of getting stuck in with the church, and they were like, we'd love to lead. We don't feel like we're ready to lead a group yet, but we've got a great house. We could host it, and it is a sweet house. And it was like, cool. And so God just put us together, and Dave, and kind of this thing.
Meddling in the middle.
Yeah, Dave doing what Dave does, yeah. And just put us together, and throughout that, as we've been, the group has been wonderful. It's been a beautiful place to just do real life together. I personally love small groups. It's been a lifeline for me through the life of the church, where Sundays maybe are a bit trickier to engage with, and sometimes it can get big and you can feel a bit anonymous. To know that week to week you've got people that you know, people that you trust and love, to be there, to do life, to pray for each other. So yeah, small groups I think has been my main one.
Amazing. And in terms of, so I asked the question about kind of faithful obedience to these two. Do you know what I mean? It's this was not on your radar 4 weeks ago, that in January, the 1st of January, you were going to be responsible. Just look out. Look at that group of people. There you go. That's
going to be easy.
Right there. Wow, tough-looking crowd, actually.
They smiled, though. That's good.
They did smile.
Nobody's left yet.
So just to be, so these guys are taking over on the 1st of January, but what's your story of faithful obedience look like?
Yeah. It's been an interesting one. Yeah, it's been an interesting one. I think if I go back a little bit as well, and so post-COVID, I think a lot of us found church really tough. I was definitely a little bit more disengaged with church than I could have been. This journey has really been one of just falling back in love with the local church, and that this is the hope of the world. This is how God does the stuff, is through places like this and people like this. And so we came to the north. We've got for those of you who don't know, if you don't see it, we have a really beautiful friendship with the Kemps, and we've at points lived in the next door house to them and all that sort of stuff. We had chickens in the garden. It was beautiful. And we have a really deep friendship with them, and being friends with beautiful leaders in the church is a real gift, because you get to see behind the scenes, and you get to see the real stuff, and it's not all glamorous. Shocker. Yeah, where it's what have we said yes to? And so we'd always said to these guys, if the Lord is calling you to go, we will come with you. We need to have a really good no to not come. And so when you guys came north, it was one of these see ya, we're staying in Central. And then it got a little bit in, and they were have you actually prayed about it, whether you'd come north? And it was no, not really. And so we had that moment of the real invitation was extended, and we felt actually for us as a family, and the Lord's in that, yes, we want to come. And that was just a really amazing move for us to just again, like I said, fall back in love with church, and for me to find the joy of it again. And I think I was just feeling a bit in Sunday context. So I'm going to look at my notes because I'm a waffler. part of that was like, when you're good friends with good leaders, it's like, for me, I'd use that as an excuse to write myself off. I'd be like, I'll go as part of a team, but like, I don't want to lead anything. Like, I'll just cheer them on from the background. And so a couple of key words that I felt God had for me over like that time where we started coming here was like, stop writing yourself off and step out of the shadows in like a, come on, Chris, kind of way. And so, in that same sweep, we felt like the invitation to do leadership college. So we spent the year, if you don't know about it, it's a year where you give a day a week over like an academic year to just train in like potential leadership stuff. And it felt like God was like nudging he was speaking about, moving into ministry in some context. With no clear destination. Lots of people will do college because they're like, I have a call on my life, this is it, I want to plant a church. I was like, I don't want to do any of that. Like, but I do want to follow you, Jesus, and I do want to be obedient to what you are calling me to. And so that was like the step that we could see. And the Lord made a way for us to be able to do it together, and just to allow us to discover that, like, actually, we work quite well as a team. We complement each other quite well. So, yeah. Is that enough of me?
Yeah, I think so. I'll have this now.
Just to be clear, I was really enjoying it.
So yeah, we've been on the journey with the Kemps as friends and leaders of stuff, and them coming to the point of looking at this 2 years and the extension and stuff like that, and prayerfully with them in that, and not one ounce of, ooh, is this us now? And yeah, so we journeyed that with them. And so we were like, right, what's James thinking now then? What's he going to do? Because I go into the church offices on a Wednesday and have worked alongside these guys. And I was like, well, that's I can keep doing that, but I've got a job now, and that's really limited. And let's see what his plan is. So we went into this meeting with James and kind of said all this stuff of like, what are we going to do? I can keep volunteering a little bit, but and then James just laid it all out, really. And yeah, the gist of that meeting was a real invitation to think about this site pastor role. And you put it to us, and I think my words were like, seriously? Like, what? But at that moment, couldn't deny that, like, my heart raced a bit. Something switched on, and James's ask of us was to see ultimately, is the Lord in this? Like, it's a human ask, but is the Lord in this? And so we went away with that. And I've actually been thinking about that a bit more just this morning, actually. And it feels really similar to our call into adoption and heart-racing moment, and fear can easily overcome and have a say. And I remember in that moment laying it all down before the Lord and experiencing his love, and his love overcoming the fear. Like, site pastor role, I was foster care attendant to mum. Like, obviously they don't align, but I'm like, I feel there's, in these moments of decision, that God just comes and meets. He's met me in my fear. And yeah, it just felt like, okay, we journeyed, and we feel and believe that God is, God is in this, and we come with our jar, and we ask God to do what he wants to do, and we love this church. Yeah. We're so excited. So I think...
Our notes have well run out.
Yeah. We knew, well, I think when the Kemps said all this stuff, we knew we weren't going anywhere. We weren't leaving or moving on. This is our home, this is our church. And I think we just want to serve it. And if this is where God wants us to serve, then okay. And recognising that this is God's church. It's not our church. It hasn't been the Kemps church. It's God's. And he makes a way when there seems to be no way. And we surrender again to him, and let's go.
That's pretty cool, isn't it? I remember that not hilarious meeting, but where they spoke for about 20 minutes, and it was one of those moments. It's like, what the heck are you going to do? Inside, I'm. Give it a bit longer. Give it a bit longer. I've got this brilliant plan. But I think sometimes. Actually, my role, sometimes people often say, James, what do you do? And I'm like, I've got no idea what I do. Do you know what I mean? I kind of float around and try and see what God's doing. But their journey began 18 months ago when they said yes to Leadership College. And it was completely out of the blue. Maybe not so much for Steph, but when Chris said yes to Leadership College, I was like, that's strange. The Lord is doing something there. Do you know what I mean? I just knew, because he's always been, like you said earlier about the shadows, and I'll support somebody else, but I'm not called to this, and I don't know these things. And so I knew 18 months ago that the Lord was messing with them. And no, because you just see it, and you're like, that's really fascinating. And then the whole way along, I'm like, well, the Lord's just messing with you, and I don't exactly know what that looks like, but I know at some point the Lord will activate, and it will be the moment. And so when there's this moment of Rach and Dave, I was like, I think I know who it is. Do you know what I mean? I just had that sense of, because you'd been leading together, you'd be doing it, it wouldn't seem like a strange thing of, well, these guys, and most people have been like, I kind of see that. And that's kind of what you want in life, really, is you want everybody communally to go, yeah, I can see that, rather than they're like, what? Why have you done that? And I felt that has been the journey of succession, transition, has just been like, oh, yeah, we can really see that. We can also see it for Rach and Dave. And I think I've had a number of people over the last 6 months being, they just ask questions, and they're like, oh, it's not been easy holding both youth and the site. Let's just be really honest about that. It's like we've been on this journey for the last year, and it has been, they're two big things. You know what I mean? A whole group of people and a whole youth ministry that's really growing. And in that tension, there's been tension in that. And it's like, actually, when they came and they were like, yeah, we think we need to pass it on, I'm like, it's just a great decision. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you're like, yeah, I agree. And so it's this, when people talk about discernment, it's a journey. And one of our values in the Vineyard is that we believe in adult relationships, in the sense that I don't sit there and say, this is what the Lord has called you to over your life. I say, do you know what? I see this in you. I can see the fingerprints of God doing something in you. What do you think? Do you know what I mean? Because ultimately, ministry, as in many other things in life, it's hard. Do you know what I mean? It's not always rosy. It can be really challenging. But actually, when Jesus has spoken about something, then they don't look there and be like, well, James, you asked me to do this. I'm like, no. I gave you an invitation and the Lord spoke, because otherwise people turn around and they're like, but it's all your fault. How could you have done this to me? And I'm like, no, you went before the Lord and you said yes to him because that was his invitation over your life. And I just think that's a really, really important thing in terms of adult relationships. We call out what we see the Lord doing, but we hopefully do it in a way that's actually empowering to that person, that they step into the thing rather than we make that step for them. And I think, and the spiritual climate and culture that we live in, I think that's always important, to be fair, but I think that's deeply important. And so actually that journey of call. So final question, what are you excited for as you take on the baton? Do you know what I mean, in the new year?
Yeah, many things. And I think first thing that I thought of at that question is just encountering God together. We can take people out of the church. We can have stuff almost fall apart around us, really. But without the Lord, this isn't, what are we doing? And we want to continue leading the church that is all about the Lord and seeks God, and that God knows what he's doing when we gather and he says he'll be with us. So I'm just excited to see what God wants to do with our time together, our space here, our literal 2 hours on a Sunday, but also then taking him to the north and beyond, and just knowing that we are kingdom carriers, and for what we've been talking about of like calling and stuff. Like, I'm just excited to see how God's going to answer that call for each one of us in this room, to step out and step into what God's got for them. And yeah, that is very exciting.
Yeah, I think just like under the banner of our stuff, of like restoring the city, renewing the nation, just seeing what that looks like in the north of Cardiff. And so it's been an amazing few years, and I think you guys would definitely, like, this has been a year of restoration and growth and all sorts of stuff, but we do feel like we're on the precipice of like, now what? Like, not just because we're different and we're new, but like, God, what are you going to do now as a site? And so, yeah, it's been really exciting doing this chat and like taking over the leadership of the site post this series of like, God has thrown mantles over people across our site, and like we really believe that He's going to be like releasing individuals and groups of people to do stuff that is new and to pioneer stuff in the north of the city and to reach people outside of where we meet and outside of our homes and all that sort of stuff. So we're really excited about that. I'm really excited about small groups. I just love small groups, and I think like I will always be excited about small groups. I want Nathan Gilbert's old top. I love small groups.
Actually, Jem was just clearing out our study. I can provide that.
Yes. Come on.
It's a bit faded.
I mean,
Nathan was the associate pastor here, for those that don't know. And when we launched small groups, he always wear his "I Love Small Groups" T-shirt. That was a little bit too small, actually.
Yeah.
And anyway, I'm not going to go into that.
We'll get a new one, mate.
It's going to be tight. No, we're not. We're going to wear the old one. We're not about waist.
I don't think that's okay. I don't think that's okay.
I love small groups.
Yeah. Oh man. I do, and I think like just to see like like the Acts 2 church of like really doing the stuff, looking after each other, caring for each other, and being together, and like that commit to community kind of phrase that we've had over the last year of like. Just choose, like, it is so good, even when you don't want to do it, like, it is so good for the soul and to be in relationship with people. So I'm excited for small groups, and I'm excited for prayer as well. I think, like Dave shared about, like, we've been a part of leading the intercession side of stuff and sort of praying over our Sundays and that sort of thing in, like, it's kind of a different layer to, like, the weekday prayer, and it's been really powerful. And, like, it was a real invitation for the Lord. We'd never led an intercession. I didn't even know what it was, to be honest. But, like, to be able to come to a Sunday morning and be like, so much of what we face is like a deeply spiritual battle. And so praying over people, praying over our space, praying over for those to come has been really powerful. And so I'm excited to see that grow. We're just excited for what's God's, like Street Cafe, hey Stu. Like Street Cafe's been bubbling and like launched, and that's been really exciting. So they had an amazing week last week speaking to, was it 20 people, something like that, Stu? Like just amazing, like 20 people who probably wouldn't call themselves connected to faith in any way, but like to speak and to pray for people. So God's already doing stuff, and so we're not here to like, we're not going to scrap everything these guys have done and like start over.
New day.
Like we're so different, and we recognise that. Like we're so different as personalities, so maybe things will feel slightly different, but like God's doing stuff already here, and we're looking to let healthy things grow, and just to see where we can be useful, really.
Just in finishing, just a thought. When we set the vision for multi-site, it was all around this idea of bonfires of His presence. Do you know what I mean? It was like, if you picture that of like a fire where God's presence and power were manifest. And so that's when we launch sites, this site would be like a big bonfire, but then small groups, which then comes in, are like little smaller bonfires of His presence. So when people say, well, what's the church about? It's not radical, it's Acts 2, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? That they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, the breaking bread, the fellowship. It's like, there's nothing new under the sun. And we're gathering around the presence of Jesus, and that's what makes us different. You know, that's the uniqueness of the church. And so it comes back to prayer, it comes back to worship, it comes back to gathering. And so it's exciting. Rach, I feel like
Yeah, can I just add, just that we cannot commend these guys highly enough to you. We have been friends for 10 years, and they are as wonderful as they seem. They are kind, and they are generous, and they are wonderful at building community. And yeah, they will be fantastic leaders. And the, oh goodness, sorry, the the roles shift a bit. We get to be here to support you guys now. Like, we're not going anywhere. We'll obviously be in youth a bit more, but like, we love these guys and they will be amazing leaders of this site, and we are 100% behind them and super excited for you and all that the Lord's going to do in you.
Amen. Amen.